I know you weren't at the dinner last night, but I also know you know what's going on and you watched it. I just want to get your reactions to what happened and where you think we go from here, and what, if anything, Congress should be investigating.
You know, my youth was dominated by the assassination of President Kennedy, Dr. King, Bobby Kennedy, and we had this long, other than the tragic shots at the same hotel with Ronald Reagan, a long period of time with peacefulness. This has really been upsetting. And you find that on Capitol Hill, there's a lot more security all around, metal detectors everywhere, a lot more Capitol Police. They actually put a lot of money in the budget for personal security for members. And now when we do town hall meetings, we're always talking to the local police, making sure there's 2 or 3 of them there, just in case.
And that's because the rhetoric has gotten so heated.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a terrible thing. You know, I don't support much of what President Trump has done, but the last thing I want is for him to be shot.
Let me give you a variation on the question I asked the Chairman Emeritus of the Foreign Affairs Committee. That is, has it affected the way that you go about your job, your awareness of that rhetoric, a sense that something terrible could happen at a town hall or a public event? Or is it something you worry about or think about?
I don't worry about it. I think my wife worries about it more than I do. Also, I don't feel like I'm a particularly high profile in terms of going viral. You know, if I were AOC or Marjorie Taylor Greene, something like that, I'd be much more worried about it. So.
We have Attorney General Todd Blanche was on CNN moments ago. We want to play you what he just said. We've got some sound.
From our preliminary investigation, it does appear the suspect was targeting members of the administration. I don't want to go beyond that because we don't have specifics yet about particular members of the administration, except that we do understand that that was his goal and his target.
He, of course, is the acting AG. I want to correct myself there. But what is your take on the fact that he was there to possibly harm not just the president, but members of the administration and the cabinet and people who may not be as high profile, maybe not safe in this climate either?
Yeah, although, you know, if you look through different administrations, a lot of Trump's folks, think Pete Hegseth or Kash Patel, they're much higher profile than Pam Bondi, than they have been in the past. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Sometimes you reach back and say, who was that person for Barack Obama or Joe Biden?
We want to talk about what's happened in Virginia politics over the last few weeks. But let me get one more question to you about this, and that is, how would you like to see Congress's role going forward in all of this? So it's early hours yet, not even early days yet in this investigation. The suspect likely to be charged on Monday, as we understand it. What's Congress's role here in the wake of what happened yesterday?
You know, the very first thing, David, I'd say is that we continue to try to improve our rhetoric. You know, that we're the country, one of the things that most upsets me is that we are more divided than we've ever been, maybe back to the Civil War. We seem to have different understandings of who we are and our factories, our understanding of our history. So the notion of treating each other with respect, even though we could have very different policy approaches, seems to still be essential to that.
Should Congress be investigating either why so many members within the line of succession were in the same room or the security apparatus and how this all happened?
I was really concerned when I saw it was Marco Rubio and the vice president and the president. That was really concerning. I know it shouldn't just be one person that could take over.
Should you be investigating that? Should Congress investigate that?
Well, you know, that would be a good oversight thing for sure. On Ways and Means, I tend not to thinking more about the tariffs and the taxes.
Fair enough, and plenty to think about there. We can talk about that in a minute as well. But let's talk about redistricting and what's happening in Virginia, indeed what's stalled for the moment in Virginia. I was saying during the break, I was on vacation traveling through Virginia, and the signs were everywhere. Vote yes, vote no.
Oh, really?
Yes, on this referendum, just a few days. It's still up. See if they get taken down. It did pass what your governor had pushed for here, this redistricting that was advantageous for Democrats. Now it's a standstill as Republicans have filed a lawsuit against it. Where does it stand? How do you see all of this playing out? And I don't need to point out we're getting closer and closer here to the midterm elections.
Well, I was glad that it passed, with some reluctance. I mean, we passed a constitutional amendment 4 or 5 years ago getting rid of gerrymandering. So we had the least gerrymandered districts in the country before this. But after Donald Trump said he was entitled to 5 seats in Texas, they took 3 in North Carolina, 2 in Ohio, 1 coming up in Missouri. Florida's about to meet, I think, to do the same thing. We felt we had to push back. And we got 3 million people showed up. It was gubernatorial-style turnout for an election in April. And it didn't pass by a lot, 3%. That's 90,000 votes. And now, you know, in a perfect Democratic world, it's 10 Democrats and 1 Republican. But that's not a given. We still have to go win those seats. And we'll be running, in many cases, against Republican incumbents who've been there many years and have deep relationships in the community.
But I do want to ask you, as we talk about turning down the political rhetoric, it is very hard to get elected as a moderate in Congress right now, partly because of the way these districts are drawn and the way voters are mobilized, that they tend to vote for the extremes of the party, which is why initially Democrats were the, when they go low, we go high party. Could there be a potential backlash to changing tactics here, and that the things you say that we should have in Congress might be harder to get?
There could be a backlash, but Christine, you go to something that's been really important to me in my 11 years in Congress, which is the notion that you have so many safe seats that Democrats have to run to the left in their primary, Republicans run to the right. We typically worry about who's going to take us out in the primary, not in the general election.
Right.
And that then means when you come to Congress, there's no overlap. When I was a kid, there were lots of very conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans. You don't have many of them anymore. Not to get nerdy on you, but there's the
We love nerdy. This is Bloomberg. Bring it on.
Okay, the Fair Representation Act, which I've been pushing for 11 years, takes us back to multi-member districts, which we had for the first 60 years in America, and ranked choice voting. And that then makes you, Northern Virginia that I represent would have 3 districts, and you'd be fighting for the middle rather than the extreme. It would hopefully bring, also you end up, not that you don't want to have the extremes, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the like, but it should cut off those ends and bring people back together.
You mentioned your own Ways and Means. You're also the senior Democrat on the Joint Economic Committee. We just got news that Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina is prepared to go ahead with voting for Kevin Warsh because of what's happened with the investigation into Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve. Your reaction to that, I wonder if you are a supporter of Kevin Warsh's candidacy for that position, and also just your reaction to the way that all of this has unfolded, both the investigation on the Justice Department side and now it being punted over to the IG at the Federal Reserve.
Well, I'm thrilled that they've withdrawn the case against Jay Powell. It was silly to begin with. If you look at cost overruns, there are so many in the federal government for many, many different reasons. And the thought that blaming him for it was pretty ridiculous. I'm so glad that Senator Tillis had stood up for that. And for Kevin Warsh, it's interesting. You look at his history, he was largely a deficit hawk and somebody that believed in managing higher interest rates. So, and I was very pleased with his testimony, saying that he wasn't going to be a sock puppet for Donald Trump.
But do you think this is enough for Powell to step away? Because, as we've been talking about here, there's no guarantee that they can't restart this investigation. He could do what the president wants him to do and then still end up facing these charges.
Yeah, but as we've seen with so many of these investigations, once you get to a grand jury, they throw it out right away. There's a lot of this is showmanship. And it costs the poor person that's being persecuted dollars
time
for lawyers,
and money,
time and money, and anxiety, and
of course.
So it's unfair, and the going after political enemies, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, is a bad thing.
You, again, Joint Economic Committee, have a great vantage on this U.S. economy, its place in the global economy. This war is continuing, lasting longer than the president said it would, and we've heard so many warning signs from our guests, policymakers, and experts about what the fallout has been so far and what it's likely to be as we see in Asia parts of the world, real difficulty in getting oil, getting refined fuel products and
fertilizer,
all that's going to have. Your sense of what this means for the economy, how worried you are about the prospects of a war that lasts longer and longer?
Well, I think one of the main reasons Donald Trump got elected was because of all the inflation during COVID, which is during Biden. And his tariffs have moved us in the wrong direction. And then the war is having a huge impact on both grocery prices and fuel. I'm paying, in Northern Virginia, it's only $4.99 to fill my car.
Only.
And it could get worse. However, big picture, I still very much believe in the American economy. We have an awful lot of interesting things going on, including, and I know Mike and I, your previous guest, co-chair of the AI caucus, there's so much good coming out of AI, including 5% productivity growth in the last quarter, and so much danger because of the real plausibility of huge job displacement.
You were studying it, weren't you? I remember that. You were like studying AI.
I'm still
getting a master's or something like that.
Yeah, I still get 9 courses to go at George Mason, but I'm working on it. So.
We only have a tiny bit of time, but when it comes to AI, spiking energy prices, this is all coming into focus with what's going on in Iran, and there's a crunch on supply and demand and everything else. As you look towards the midterms, as you look towards November, as you talk about those kitchen table issues and how they got President Trump into office, will Democrats take advantage of that, and will this help you going into the fall?
Oh, I think so. You know, things look very good right now, but it's April, and a week's a long time in politics. But we have many seats we think we can take, relatively few that we need to defend. And with the president's disapproval rating at 58%, this is potentially wave election. Although you look back to Charlie Cook, he said, wave elections tend to follow wave elections one way or the other, so there aren't that. We have to temper our expectations, and we really only need 3 or 4 seats.